Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas Perek Zayin. We are going to conclude Halacha Gimel. We're going to learn, God willing, Halacha Daled, and perhaps even start at least the Mishnah Halacha Hey. In the Oiz Vahaders edition, we're going to be learning Daf Ayin Vav. We left off on Daf Ayin Hey Amid Beis. At the end, the last word of the second to last line, Mamikaimin, all the way towards the end of the Amid. And before we go back to the Machloikes in the Mishnah, whether we change the Nusach of Zimun from 3 to 10, everyone agrees. Not mentioning Hashem's name. Once you have 10 and more, you mention Elokeinu. Question is, do you also change the Nusach when you come to 100, when you come to 1,000, when you come to 10,000? That was a Machloikes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Haglili. And before we get to that the fact that everyone agrees that you have to have 10 in order to evoke Hashem's name, that is connected to the general rule that you cannot say any Dvarim Shebekadusha unless you have a minyan of 10 adult male Jews. Question is, where do we learn that from? So we actually learned two approaches. One was the Toich Eda Koidach Meraglim, and the other was Bnei Yisrael from the Shvatim. And I know that after we finished the recording in last class, I think it was Danny, the Gabbai, or someone else. I think it was Danny pointed out something very good. We had that whole sugya, whether you have to have 10, remember, or whether 9 and maybe a minor is good enough. B'chlal, not only for Zimun, but as do we learn Pshat in the Gemara, even for a minyan, maybe it's connected to this. Because if we learn it Bnei Yisrael, like we learned in the Charedim, really by the Shvatim, we find elsewhere, not the Bnei Yisrael and Miketz that the Gemara quoted, but we find regarding the Shvatim that when you had only 9 of them, with the Shechina, they were considered a minyan, which gave them the power to make the Chedim, as we learned last week. But if we learn it from Toich Eda, over there were 10, there were not 9. Another thing, Toich Eda is a limud, a minyan from Koirach and from the Menaglim. You can say it's from Rishoyim. You can even say also from Balei Tshuva, the Bnei Koirach did Tshuva. They were part of the Toich. Masha'enkein, Bnei Yisrael is from Tzadikim. So the question is this whole idea, with whom should you daven? And as we say in the beginning of Yom Kippur, that we get permission from Beis Din Shel Mailam, Beis Din Shel Mata, Lispalalim HaVaryanim. That's because we actually learned that Toich and Eda. Okay, so first of all, we're going to go to the Machlokes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Haglili. Rabbi Yossi Haglili that holds that the Nusach of the Zimun changes when the Kehila grows, and he gave the benchmarks as we just quoted, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. He learns it from a pasuk in Tehillim, B'makehei lois baruchu Elokim. B'makehei lois means b'lashon rabim, that in different types of Kehilas do you bench God differently. And what does Rabbi Akiva do with the B'makehei lois? Ultimately, the Gemara is going to say that it has to do with Kri and Ksiv. We'll speak this out when we learn it inside. And you should know that throughout Shas, this is a Lishito Sayu between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Haglili, whether you learn Be'ikir, whether you give primacy to the way it's pronounced with the Nekudas, or do you give primacy to the way certain words are written. And even though we have a Masorah that it's pronounced a certain way, but if you focus on the writing, it allows you to read it for limudim in other ways, because there are no nekudas in the Torah, as we'll get. The Gemara is going to relate various stories prior to the new Mishnah, prior to Mishnah Daled, that will have one under theme, one common theme, and that is what happens if a person comes to a location who does not know the local minhag, who deviates from the local minhag. When is it that he must be corrected? Or when is it that we say that he's following someone, he doesn't know the local minhag, so let him be the way he is? That will be a couple of stories regarding that topic, related to the Baruch Hu Es Hashem HaMavoidach, regarding to the next Machlokes in the Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yishmael, whether you don't say the word HaMavoidach, or yes, like Rabbi Yishmael, like we paskin, that we do say the word HaMavoidach when we say Baruch Hu. The next Mishnah, on Daf Ayin Vav, is going to tell us the rule that once you have 3 people eating together, Einam Rishoyim Lecholek, because if there's 3 and one separates himself from the 3, that will take away the capacity, the ability, the permissibility, which they are already responsible in to make zimun. Mashenkin, if you have 6, then they can split into 2 groups. If you have 9, they can split into 3 groups. You have 10, 11, 12, 13, you can't split. Once you hit 20, meaning even if they're going to divide into groups, provided that each group will have 10, each group will be able to fulfill their chiyuv of saying Elokeinu, then they could split. That will be the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Vav. The Gemara is going to open up a topic which is very relevant, and that is what happens if on Shabbos, when you benched, you forgot to say Ritzei. What happens if on Yom Tov, when you benched Birchas Hamazon, you forgot to say Yalla B'Yom? Question is, do you have to go back and do the whole Birchas Hamazon over again or not? And really, the way we will learn the Gemara, that will depend on a machlekes between Rav and Shmuel. Listen to this: whether a person is chayiv to wash hamoitzi on Shabbos Yom Tov. And as we'll see, if you're chayiv to wash, chayiv to bench. Shabbos, you have to say it. Say if you don't say it, say that will be the shita that holds. You have to go back and say the whole thing again. That's the way we. L'shita Shmuel, that you're not obligated. Of course, there's a mitzvah to have oinik. But if a person has oinik Shabbos without the washing, they say that then it doesn't work with their body as well. If you're not chayiv to wash, then even though taka you should say it, but if you didn't, as we'll see, you're not going to be obligated to repeat the Shemona Esrei, to repeat the Birchas Hamazon, excuse me. And again, if we'll have time, we'll begin the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Vav Amid Beis, the Halacha Hey, the 5th Mishnah of the Spedek. And the Mishnah is going to tell you that if you have 2 chaburos that are eating bebayis echad, but not around the same table, so the rule will be bisman that even only miktsasan royin zeh et zeh, if even some of these 2 groups see each other, harei elu mitztarfin lezimun. And as the Gemara is going to point out, it doesn't even have to be bebayis echad, that even if the groups are in different homes, let's say it's 6 and 4, it doesn't matter the numbers. Together you would have had 10. If only some of them see each other, the power of Re'iyah, how Re'iyah is mitzadef, that will be the opening topic of that Mishnah. Without any further ado, Chevre. So again, Daf Ayin Hey, Amid Beis, all the way by the Nekuda, by the second, towards the end of the second last line. The last word of the second to last line. Now the question is, Rabbi Yossi Haglili, that holds that according to the size of the group, accordingly you change the nusach of the zimun, right? Rabbi Yossi Haglili, what was the source from the pasuk in Tehillim, Kapitel Samaches, B'makehei lois lashon rabim, in various communities, Baruch Hu Elokim, implying depending on the type, meaning quantity of the kehillah, accordingly will you bench God by adding from Elokeinu to Hashem Elokeinu, as we learned in the Mishnah, etc. So now the question is, my mekaymin rabbanon, time of Rabbi Yossi Haglili. What do the Rabbanon, meaning Rabbi Akiva, why is he called Rabbanon? Because we already established that we paskin like Rabbi Akiva, that there's only one shinui, from less than 10 to 10. From 3 to 10, Nevarech She'achalnu. Once you have 10, you say Nevarech Elokeinu, or the others will say Nevarech Le'Elokeinu. Once you have 10 and you say the Elokeinu, there's no change. What did they do with the B'makehei lois? So let's learn Pshat in the Gemara. The Gemara is giving 2 approaches. Let's learn it this way. Approach number 1 is, yes, you're right. It says B'makehei lois. Again, Lashon Rabim. But Lashon Rabim doesn't mean that there's a minion of 10, there's a minion of 100, there's a group of 1,000, and it changes. No. It means what happens if you have many groups of 10 people. Whenever you have a minion amongst many minyanim of 10, of 100, of 1,000, so it's not going to the numbers in a group, it's going to the many groups. That b'makehei lois means b'chol kehillah, the Lashon Rabim goes to every kehillah and kehillah. Every time people gather, look inside the words of the Rashirilio, all the way in the bottom, right, all the way in the bottom, second to last line, the left column, that kol asara v'asara da'alma, you have to bench God when you do zimun. If you have 10, you have to add Elokeinu. Avalav lememra, the akol roif kohol, ika b'racha chadasha, that for every number in the kahal, accordingly, whether it's 10, whether it's 100, whether it's 1,000, whether it's 10,000, no, he does not learn it that way. Okay. Daf Ayin Vav Amid Aleph. Amar Rabbi Chanina, the son of Rabbi Abahu, I'll tell you better. I'll give you another approach. Now, it's not a better approach, but as we'll speak out in a moment, this approach is very problematic for us, or at least it points out something very unusual that has to be dived into. So he says like this, that if you open up a Tehillim, it's going to say, Taka b'makehe lois, that's the way you pronounce it. And we have a tradition for the pronunciation, that's called for the kri. But what's the ksiv? It's written without a vav. Between the lamed and the saf, there's no vav. And therefore, you are allowed, as far as making drashas are concerned, to read it b'makehe las, which is b'lashon yachid. So adarab, if you focus on the ksiv, and you should know, guys, that Rabbi Akiva, not only here, throughout Shas, whenever there is an option of kri ksiv, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yisaglili, Rabbi Akiva ksiv, Rabbi Yisaglili will be, kri means the way it's pronounced. It means the primacy, the iked limud is from the way we are taught how you pronounce it. So Rabbi Yisaglili, who focuses on the kri, the makehei lois, lashon abim, yeah, every type, depending on the kehillah. How do you bench God? How many people are there? Not 10 or not. No, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. Rabbi Akiva says, since it's written without a vav, so you get to darshan by reading it without a vav, lashon yachid. There's only one kehillah, which is either you have less than 10, no kehillah, or you have 10 or more, yeah, that's it. Sounds beautiful. Problem with this is, open up your Tehillim, Tehillim Yosef Yitzchak, right? And you're going to see that the Kapitel Samaches, by us, it says, "B'makehei lois mitavov." In other words, we don't have it this way. The problem is, no, the whole answer is that the ksiv is without a vav. The ksiv is with a vav. By us, by our Tehillim, b'makehei lois is mitavav. No, there are other words, not here. Many words can be that way. No, it's this. So, like, just to be aware that there's a Rabbi Akiva Igen and Masechta Shabbos that compiles throughout Shas many times where the Gemara is going to give a Kri and Ksiv. But if you look into our Tanakh, you don't understand what we're talking about. This is one of them. Which means, again, this is a problematic thing, is that, listen, we're talking about Nach, so what? But we're so careful. Right, that Ezra HaSofer doesn't mean Ezra the scribe. Just for the record, the Gemara says Ezra means the counter. He counted every letter in the Torah. It means everything is so meduik. Not only in Torah, meaning Torah, Chamisha Chumshe Torah. In Tanakh, every letter is counted. Remember the whole Gemara? What's the middle of the Chumash? What letter? Gachain. What's the middle of Tehillim? What's the middle of Tehillim? To have the middle, I think it was Yechar Semeno Chazir Miyar. I think that's the Gemara says the letter, and in our Tehillim it's big. Middle, you have to know every letter. It's something that there's a question as to the letters in Tehillim. How did that come to be? What's the inner meaning of it? Okay, just to open up this topic. So here we have a whole Gemara that is only based on a different text that they had. We don't have this text. Let's go right. Amar Rabbi Akiva. Going to letters, right? That one of the differences between Babli and Yerushalmi, we mentioned this already, is how you spell Akiva. And how we paskin like the Babli here. So when a person gets married, the Kivi, you make the Ksuba, you have to write Akiva Metan Aleph. Even though, like we mentioned, that the Or Zarua said that he named his Sefer Or Zarua Latzadik because he was a Rav, he was writing Ksuba by Ksuba, doesn't make such a big difference, but God forbid, by others who have to have a get, how to write the word Akiva. So he didn't know. It bothered him. So he had a dream. However this works, these shailas, the shaila chaloimas, and he was told by God, he was that the last letter from every word, Reb, Akiva, Mamish, understated. And Simcha ends with a hey. So that is aligned here with the Rabbi Akiva over here. Anyways, I'm Rabbi Akiva, Mamish, by Sakneses. And that is what led us into the next. So Rabbi Akiva is giving a raya to the Chachamim, to Rabbi Yosef Glili. What are you talking about? But when there's 100 people, you change the Nusach of Zimun? Look in the Beis HaKnesses. By a minyan, there is no such a thing. By a shul, it's either there is no minyan or there is a minyan. Once there is a minyan, nothing changes if there is 100. Or when there's noise, there's freilachkeit, the singing is nicer, but not the Nusach. That's what and he gave it right. Baruch Hu. Without 10, you can't say Baruch Hu. Once you say Baruch Hu with 10, what do we say? We say Baruch Hu Hashem. And we don't say, there's 100, say Baruch Hu Hashem Elikim. There's 10,000 Yoshev Akruvim. We don't do that. Happened to be that you see from Rabbi Akiva's example of Baruch Hu, Rabbi Akiva didn't say the word Samavoirach. In other words, Rabbi Akiva Taka holds, you say Baruch Hu Hashem, and that's it. And that came Rabbi Yishmael, and we say here we pass like Rabbi Shmuel, that you don't say only Baruch Hu Hashem, but you add the words Hamavayda. Says the Gemara a couple of stories, all about Minhagim, like we mentioned. Rab Chia Barashi, Kom Makri Ba'orais. He was called up for an aliyah. Before an aliyah, not only do we make Birchas HaTorah pre and post, but we also begin prior to making the bracha pre Yesei Baruch Hu Es Hashem and Va'amar Baruch Hu, but he didn't say Hamavayda. In other words, he said it the way Rabbi Akiva does. We already said we paskin like Rabbi Shmuel. What happened was, is be'oin, that means they wanted mish tekei, they wanted to silence him. It's a very interesting expression. I'll tell you what I mean by silencing. What they wanted, the oilam, is to correct it. That's the minute, the nudnikim. What would be the correction? Go back. Silencing doesn't mean for him to be silent. You say Baruch, he said Baruch Hashem. And he was expecting everyone to say, Baruch Hashem, loylam vod. People didn't want to go on. They wanted to silence him for him to go back. Just don't know. He didn't want to repeat it. But Amar Lohin Rav was there. And Rav told him, Ar poine, interesting expression. Look inside the Pnei Moshe. Hanichuloi. Ar poine means, let him be. Watch out, let him be. Don't correct him. Because he did like Rabbi Akiva. Now, this is much bigger than people think, this story. Because there is a rule that you have to be noyig like your locality. So if someone comes into a shul where the nusach is nusach Chabad, and they daven another nusach, they should be corrected. We're not saying they don't have whom to lean on. We're saying that this is not the local minute. This story is telling you differently. So you have the Meiri in Bavli, when we have the story, he adds a very important nuance because of how do you do it? He says like this, that if the person knew what the minig is and they did not follow the local minig, then you stop them. The story is only because Rab Chia Bar Ashi did not know the local minig. And in other words, when a person doesn't know the local minig and he does something, he has whom to lean on. He's leaning on Rabbi Akiva. Here is, we take a learn from Rav, don't correct him. Now, why not? Because when you correct a person, what are you benefiting? You're benefiting a correction. What are you losing? You are shaming someone. That's the downside. If you have to do it, you have to do it. But I'm saying if you don't have to, don't correct. That's the pshat over here. Another story. Rab Ze'eda, the great Rab Ze'eda, he was a kohen. And this is something that's common, that after the kohen gets an aliyah, if there is no Levi, we don't give it in Yisrael. We call this b'mekayim Levi. It's the same oila l'kohen, the same kohen. And you dafka don't even call another kohen, because it should not be moitzi laz. It can look like, we realize this guy's kahuna, his yichus is not perfect. Let's call someone else. The same person gets both aliyahs, and that's what happened. He was called up because he was a kohen. Mimamish used the words Yamoy b'mekayim Levi, and what happened was he made another bracha pre and post. Now, we already had this topic not that long ago. In Bavli, the topic is in Masechtas Megillah. We have just a few, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, that initially, in the beginning, the system was, not only did everyone read what they were called to read, there was no Baal Koder, but it's more than that, is that you have to make a bracha pre and post. But you know when you made the bracha pre and post, you might have spoken, it was last week. Let's say when you called 3 people. The first person who got called made the bracha pre only. And the last person who was called only made the bracha post. That's the way it used to be. So when there were 3 people that were called up, the middle guy, Bechlal, didn't make a bracha. Elamad, the Gemara Megillah says, why did the Chachamim change it? During the times of the Amoraim, in middle. Because if someone comes to shul early, if someone leaves early, they're not going to see the post. They're not going to hear the post. If someone comes late, someone will get called up. They won't make a bracha pre. It's going to give the erroneous concept that you only have to make a bracha pre, or they only have to make a bracha post. We get it. Now the question is, how far? And therefore they said everyone has to make pre and post. But this is still during the time where there was a question. We get it. Every person has to make pre and post because people come early, people come late. But 1 second, people leave early, people come late. Not coming early is good. Question is, what happens if the same person gets 2 aliyahs, which is what happened over here. So here there was a question in minig. Here, okay, the same person got an aliyah. Anyways, it was that there was just a bracha in the beginning of the whole thing and one bracha at the end. Here it's the same person. Why does he have to make a bracha pre-post kohen and the same person pre-post Levi? That is where there was a. Some people held no, since it's the same person, He doesn't make a bracha at the end of the Aliyah Kohen. He doesn't make a bracha in the beginning of Levi. It's the same person. He'll make a bracha at the beginning at the end, but he'll make it in the beginning of Kohen at the end of Levi. What did Rab Zeira do? He didn't do it that way. He went all the way. He went the way we did it now. For every Aliyah, that's for both. And here also, the Olam, wherever this happened, they wanted to silence him. Now here, silencing means stuck at the silence. In other words, he began to make a bracha, and they wanted to tell him, be quiet. Now going on, Abchia Barashi already got a hoirah from Rav. He was not silenced. Same thing. Because in his place, that's the way you did it. And here again, if Rab Zeira, the way the Meiri says, if he would have known that in this shul we do it a different way, he'd be the biggest Rab Zeira. If you know, you have to follow the minhag. If you don't know, then you get to go on this. And let's go weiter. Now that we're speaking about a changing the local minhag, changing even the nusach. Baruch Hu Hashem, Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavoidach. Now we're going to go into a big topic. And this is huge. This is a topic that should be learned al pi Chasidus, about a change that was made when we are addressing the Eibishter. How it used to be one way, and then it was changed, and ultimately it came back to the way it used to be. So here we begin. The Gemara is beginning by quoting a pasuk in the Chemia that at some point, and this, the way it's understood clearly, we are referring to Birchas HaTorah, that when Ezra was called up to read from the Torah, it says, "Vayivorech Ezra es Hashem hu Elokim hagadol." Now, of course, God is Gadol, and God is Gibor, and God is Loida, and you can speak forever, and you won't even begin to give the right praise of Hashem, because Hashem is Ein Sof. It's unusual that you have this expression that he blessed Hashem Elokim hagadol. There was something that we're trying to tell us. And there is a question, there's a machlekes, we have a tradition, two options of what that means. And the Bameh, we're going with the Girsa here, Gidloi. So one opinion is that what was unusual when Ezra was called up to the reading of the Torah, that we said that he praised or he blessed the great Eibishter, because the Gidloi b'Shem HaMafoish. We have a rule that it's not the way Hashem's name is written, is the way it's pronounced. No, it's written Yud Kei Vav Shem Havaya. How do we pronounce it? Shem Admus. In the Beis Hamikdash, it's different. That reading of the Torah is connected to the Beis Hamikdash, and Ezra was a Navi, and at that time he knew that there was something unique, that he used Yud Kei, he pronounced Yud Kei Vav Kei, the way it should be pronounced, with the right vowels, v'chule. And therefore, it's recorded that he benched Hashem Elikim Hagadol Gidloi b'Shem. And B'chlal, when you go from Shem Adnai, which is Malchus, to Shem Havaya, which is minimally all of the Sfiras, and Shem Havaya sometimes, as we learn in Chasidus, it goes to that which is above the Sfiras, that's called Gadol. It's greater, it's infinite. Rav Masna Amar, and that's what the connection will be. Rav Masna Amar no Gidloi bebracha. No, that Ezra was the one who made God great, not over here, because Ezra was Megadol Hashem. He made God great in the brachos. What are you talking about? What are we referring to? So here comes the whole thing. Rav Simon b'Shem B'Shua ben Levi. To know what it means, you have to have a bigger question. Why do we call the great group of Chachamim, who are also the Sanhedrin, not that they lived all at the same time, but they were a total of 120. And it went up into the times of the second Beis Hamikdash. That means it began in Golus, but it went into the beginning of the building of the second Beis Hamikdash. And they are referred to the Anshe Knesses Hagdoil. Anshe Knesses. We can call them the Knesset. I know that the word Knesset was stolen by the Zionists for who knows what. But I'm talking about it's a beautiful, the people of the assembly. And the siddur that we have from them, and the closing of the Tanakh is from them. So people say, yeah, they're great, they did great things, yeah, but it's not that, it's something specific about Gedula. Why are they called Gedolah? Because they restored the greatness of God Almighty To the way it used to be. What are we talking about? So Amar Rav Pinchas, Moshe Hiskin Matbea Shal Tefillah. Moshe instituted that when you daven, it's not that Moshe Rabbeinu formulated the Shemoneh Esrei. The Gemara is not saying that. The Gemara is saying that when Moshe Rabbeinu referred to God, and therefore later, when you refer to God in the Shemoneh Esrei or in other places, how did he express himself? Now the Gemara is quoting a pasuk in Parshas Eikev where it says, "Ki Hashem Elokeichem Hu Elokei Hu Elokim," and "Va'adonai Hu Adonim." Then it says, "Hokeil Hagodol Hagibor V'Hanoira," and the pasuk continues, "Asher Lo Yisapanim V'Lo Yikach Shoicha." But we're going to focus on Hokeil Hagodol Hagibor V'Hanoira. Just to know, this we learn in Chassidus, that Chesed in Kabbalah sometimes is called Gedula. B'Chashem Hagdula V'Hagavura V'Tiferes. That's the 10. I know you see. Kichoil is Yisoid. Havai Hamamlocha. You have the 10 spheres. Just to know technically that whenever we're referring to Chesed of Toyu, it's called Gadol. This is something that Rabbi Paltiel just reminded me. I asked him yesterday, like I want to remember that. And whenever you're speaking about Chesed from Tikkun, it's called Chesed. That's why there's a change. And the reason for that is it makes sense because Toyu is Taka Oidis Merubim. Don't think Merubim limited, unlimited. The Kedon Taka were unable to hold it. So that's why it's called Gadol. Because whatever is there in a much greater way. The Oidis were Merubim. But anyway, so this goes. So I really have, if you're speaking to the Midos, we know you can say that there are 6 meters. Malchus is always separate. But really, the lower 3 is a certain expression of the higher 3. So it's correct to refer to the Midos with Chesed Gvura Tiferes, which is what Moshe Rabbeinu says, Hagodol, Hagibev Hanoi. However, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that referred to the Eibishter by evoking these 3 attributes. Well, came Yirmiyahu, and he did not say Hanoira. And again, these are psukim, guys. And it says in Yirmiyahu, Hokel Hagodol Hagibar. But he didn't refer to God as, and let's go to awesome. He skipped it. Yeah, he didn't. Very good. First of all, Noida is Tiferes, but let's go to Noida. He didn't say it. Now, 1 second. The Gemara is going to explain why he did it. Lama Amar Hagibar. Hold on. We understand why he didn't say Hanoida, because it was a churban, because he foresaw the churban. So where's God's awesomeness? In other words, God's awesomeness can only be seen in the Beis Hamikdash, as we'll explain in a moment. The whole idea of Tiferes David, which is the middle, which has in it both opposites, right? The Nimna Hananois, the middle cup that you have in the Kodesh HaKodshim, ultimately. That type of Gilui Elikus, where 2 opposites get together, that you have in the Beis Hamikdash. There's no Noida. But 1 second. What about Gibor? Gibor. You can argue, Gibor, the temple was destroyed. Adarabah. This is very similar to what we have in the Sugi in Bavli and Gittin, the Elaim, that the fact that Hashem was silent when Titus did the terrible things that he did in the Kodesh Kodshim, that's the Gevur of the Eibishter. Ezo Gibor, Hashem held himself back. He told him that Lozenna Likra is Gibor. No fakert, that even though there's a Churban Adarab, because Shuhuroya Churban Beis Evishoisik. So that's the Gibor Kavish Sitzrei. And I want you to know that this expression of Gevura, holding back, is only if something is happening for which Hashem should have reacted right now. If there is a constant Helem, it's no longer called Gibor. No, in the beginning of Galos, we call God Gibor. Once you're 70 years into the Galos, the Gemara is going to say in a moment, that's not called Gibor anymore. HaKavish Sitzrei, you know, as if you're hiding and you're hiding and you're hiding and you're hiding and you're holding back and you're holding back and you're holding back. There comes a point that's not a Gibor anymore. That's a whole different thing. But in the beginning, he's called. Now, why is he not called Noida? So the answer is because she'ein Noida elo Beis Hamikdash. The gilui of Nimna Hamim Nois, of the Kav and the middle Kav, which goes all the way up to Kesed, is only in the Beis Hamikdash. And this is based Psukim. Pasuk again, same Tilum Samaches. We began with Makahelos, is also Tilum Samaches. It says Noida Elikim. Where do we see God's Noida? God's Moida Dekait, you know where you see it? Mi Migdashecha. Beautiful. Oh. Came along Daniel, and then quoting a pasuk over there in Daniel. What does it say over there? Hokel Hagodol V'Hanoida. Hold on. Why didn't he say Hagibor? Like we said, God HaKovish Yitzroi. Because one of Nesurim B'Koilar and his children are into shackles, and Hechen Igvorasai. And as the Marafulda says, hold on, didn't we just say before that God saw the Churban and he held himself back? Says the Marafulda in the middle of the narrow lines. That was the reason for a Gibur. No. That is something that B'shas Maisa. And the same thing again we have a Bayis Sheni when Titus went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and he made the biggest skill of Hashem over there. So at that moment, Hashem kept himself silent. Once you're set, forget about this galus. Even the first between Batim Mikdashim, you can't say Gibur anymore. So he took out Gibur. You don't see God's Gevurah. Now the question is, didn't we just say that Noira Elikim is only is Memikdashecha? Yes, Memikdashecha you see Noira, but there was an event where you saw opposites coming together. Because Lozen no Likras Noira, Banoiroi also Lono Bekif Shana Eish. Right, the Hananya Mishol Bazario, who didn't bow down not to an idol, just to the image of Nebuchadnezzar, and they were saved. That's called opposites coming together. You put a lion and you put a person, and the lion is hungry, and the person tastes good. The lion is a lion. The nature of the lion remained a lion. Navas then he didn't eat up the tzaddikim. That was some sort of gilui of elikus, similar to what we had on the Beis Hamikdash. But what do we see? That from Yirmiyahu, it was either Hakel Hagibor or Hakel Hanoida. The Chesed Hagadol. Hagadol always remained. Question is, what do you have other than Chesed? Chesed Gvura, Chesed Tiferes. Comes along, that's why he's referred to the great God, not the great God over there in the benching, or by the Kriyas HaTorah. The Kivin Sha'am the Ashkenaz Hagdoila. Why they called the Ashkenaz Hagdoila? For one reason, they did unbelievable things, but Gedoila for this, that when they formulated the Shmoyne Esrei, they did it in Golos. This was done before the building of the second Beis Hamikdash. Ashkenaz Hagdoila. What did they do? Okay, in other words, they gave us the capacity. They gave us the capacity to see Gilui Elikus everywhere. Where do we find that? Mamish Basalagani, Tavshim Pei Dalit. That we're learning in the Maimon Mem Dalit. We were learning this over Shabbos, and what we didn't get there Shabbos is that's another part of the Maimon, which is very deep on Yonim. In other words, that let me go better. You have the not better, just the same thing, that this week's Torah Ord of Eilu Shmois B'nai Yisrael, that's the Nakuda of the Alter Rebbe. That Golus normally means that the Shechina Bigolusa and Kuchurichu Istalak La'ela, we'll speak about this week after davening, that's normally Golus. The word of the Alter Rebbe is, Golus means that even though the Shechina goes to a lower level, ultimately it's revealed in the lower level. And the whole thing, that the Torah went down from the pre-Atzilus into Atzilus through the written Torah. Then it came into the Biyah through the Mishnah, Braisa, and Gemara. In other words, the concept is that we go into a lower reality, and in the lower reality, in the beginning, godliness is not revealed, either this or that. And he was able to draw forth, not the way it was in the higher worlds, and a Hanami, but even in the lower reality, you can still see, okay, and the Gemara now wants to just conclude the Sukkah by asking that how can Yirmiyahu, how can Daniel even take out what Moshe Rabbeinu did? Ubasar v'dam yesh le koyach litin kitzba. Kitzba means a limit. L'dvarim halalu. Do you remember right at the beginning of Brachas? I think Dav Gimel. There was someone who was davening. Right, Eliyahu Navi heard him daven, and he was praising the Eibishter. Okay, and this, and at the end, right, he thought he's doing something good. So Eliyahu Navi asked, "What, do you finish praising God? What, do you couldn't find more praises?" So he wanted to know, what should he do? He says, the more you praise, to you, God silences praise. Sometimes, lahavdil, when you praise your wife, you get into trouble. The more you praise, the bigger trouble. Honey, you're beautiful. That's it. Best thing is silent. Bittul. Oh, novas then. So the question is, how can you praise? You can praise because Moshe Rabbeinu said the pasuk in Eik. So if Moshe Rabbeinu said it, how can you change it? Very powerful Gemara. So the Gemara answers on listen to these words. First of all, they were Nevi'im. But even there, since they were Nevi'im, meaning that they saw God b're'iyah, that's a Navi, right? The whole Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim. It wasn't Emunah only. It wasn't Chabad. The Alter Rebbe gave us a gift, understanding only. They mamish saw. That's the meaning of she'eli kon amiti. There was a certain truthfulness that they had, which is what happens when you see something, which they were Nevi'im, and therefore truth is exact. Ve'ein machnifin oisay. Adding something that they didn't see, it's called flattery. It's called false flattery. In other words, it wasn't emes. How powerful is that? Look inside the Pnei Moshe, right before the Mishnah, right in the left column. Ve'ein machnifin loy, loymer kain, to say that which they don't see. Lefi hazman, they were standing in their time. And when they were in that time, they knew it. They knew that you have Haggadah, that you have Hanoida. You don't have a giver, or you have a giver. You don't have, they knew that. So they were saying the emes. That's not a kasha. A navi can say the emes. We don't know. We quote Moshe Rabbeinu. They were telling you the way godliness was revealed in their Zman. So in other words, the greatness of Ezra, that's the whole point, is that's another emes, is that he reached a point that's called greatness. Chesed is like mime. It goes down. Greatness means, that's the no basalagani, that Ein Soif isn't only Lamai Lamaila Adin Katz. That's the whole word of this year's Maimer. Lamata Mata Adin Tachus. Now, the Rebbe writes in Mem Daled that in the last year in Oisud Gimel, the word Lamata Lamata means the whole Maimer was explaining how much Klippa conceals. And here he explains that no matter how lowly there can be a Klippa, somehow the Ein Soif will be Nisgala there. That's this year. That's Oisud Daled. And once you can see that, then you can call the Oibishter Hanoida. Hanoida is the Kava. I'm sorry. Okay. Now that we spoke all that, let's go to the next halacha, next Mishnah, Mishnah 4, the fourth Mishnah of the Perek. So here we already learned this rule that Shloisha Sha'achul Ka'achlas, that if you have three people that ate together, based on what we learned in the first Mishnah of this Perek, that they're Chayavin Lizamin. Once you're Chayav to be Mizamin, you don't have the right to break that Chiyuv, which would be if you have 3 or 4 or 5, for you to break. No, not. I take that back. Yeah, to leave, to make the group less than 3. And the truth is and however, let's go with that logic. What happens if you have 6 people eating together? If they divide themselves, not 5 and 1, right? Not 4 and 2, 3 and 3. Then they are allowed to do that because they're not removing their chiyuv. Shisha nechlakim. Similarly, that can happen until Asara. How do you do it until Asara? I'll tell you how. When you have 6, you can divide into what? 2 groups. When you have 9, if you want, you can go 3, 3, 3, because you're not changing any chiyuv of the zimun. Once you come 10, you can't divide b'chlal, because if you're gonna 1 will leave the 10, right? 2 will leave the 11, then you're not going to say Elohim. But when you come to 20, very simple. Okay, now that the Mishnah says that they cannot divide themselves, there is an exception to that. And in order, as an intro to the exception, we're going to go into another topic, and we're going to come back. We're going to speak out. That will be the last Rashidili on the summit, which is already on Amud Beis. All of this is not, it's connected because of the Mishnah says, Einam Rishoyim Lecholek, I'll show you an exception. We spoke this out on the intro. Here's the Nakuda. People ate, they benched on Shabbos, they forgot to say. Yom Tiv, they forgot Yalav Yom. What do you do? Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Let's go inside. Tani. Hoyo Yoshev Oichel B'Shabbos. And B'Shachach Ol Yizkir Shabbos in Birchas Hamaz. I'm telling you, it's the same thing in Yom. Rabbi Amar Chayzer. Chayzer means you go back to the beginning of the benching. Shmuel Omer Ein Chayzer. And we spoke on it in the intro for the people who decided to come a few minutes late, just to know the reason behind it. It's a big machlokes. Are you chayiv to eat bread on Shabbos? Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. So for all of the gluten allergic people, or the women or the men today that don't want to wash, you can lean on Shmuel. And it's connected to that. Rav holds you're chayiv to wash. If you're chayiv to wash, connected. If you have to say that say, you have to. If you don't say that say, bench again. Shmuel says the whole washing is not, the Shabbos is not chayiv washing. Of course you have to add the say. But if you skipped it, if you forgot it, you don't have to go back. Now, Shimon, Barba, in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Shafik Hisker, Sholosh Chodesh, Shafik Lehisker, Ein Machzir Anoisoi. People should remember, we also learned this already in Yerushalmi, Normally, when you have a doubt whether you mention something or not, people say it's a 50-50. No, no, no. Whenever you have a regilus, it's like when you go from Moedet Atal to Mashav Ruach, and you have a suffix within the first 90 days, whether you said it or not, it's not shot that it's 50-50. Since you don't add Yalav Yavoy, it's the anomaly. Having a suffix, whether you said it or not, halachically means you didn't say it. And what do we see over there? That you don't have to go back. So what's that problem? So not a problem. So we see that Shmuel holds like who? Like Shmuel. Now there's a big difference. What's the big difference? We can say more. He holds like everyone. Because on Rosh Chodesh, you're not chayiv to wash. You can go that on Shabbos here, on Yom Tov here, Rosh Chodesh not. But that's what Rabbi Yechanan says. Gemara says that Ashkech Tanu Yipal. Rabbi Yechanan is taken from the first era of Damri Noyim. But now that we found the Baraisa, we know that the Tanoim held otherwise. What does it say over there? That's the Kol Yom Sheish B'Karban Musaf. And even Rosh Chodesh and Chola Moyed, Sarech Lahaskir Me'ein Ha'Ma'oira, you have to mention, not only in Shemona Esrei, by the way, this is also in Berachas HaMazon. And the Baraisa says, Berachal B'Tchaktana, that Im Lo Yiskir Machzir Noisei. If you forgot, you go back. Both in Shemona Esrei, parenthetically, it's only on the day that there's Musaf. The night of Rosh Chodesh, we don't go back. But anyways, let's go back. Then, like Chanukah important, even though Tzarech Lahaskir Me'ein Ha'Ma'oira, the Allah Nisim, but Im Lo Yiskir Ein Machzir Noisei. What does he see clearly? That this Braisa holds, my friends, that on Rosh Chodesh there is Musaf. If you forget, you have to go back. Now it fits with what we're saying, just the way we're learning it. No, what's really this Braisa is holding that you have to wash on Rosh Chodesh. It's all connected to this. Now, hold on. What's the shaykhs to our mission? Now you'll see. Now comes a story. Everything is a story. Chanan bar Abba and his chever have a yosvin ochlin b'shabsa. They were eating a meal on Shabbos. How many people did you have, guys? We'll see over here. We had 4 people. And min the ochlin ubarchin kom asli. After they finished their eating and they made berachas hamazon, they went. What happened was Chanan bar Abba, for whatever reason, came back to that room like 10 minutes later. He forgot something. And when he came back, what did he see? They were saying Birchas Hamazon again. So Amalei told him, "Well, like Far Benachman, we were benched already." Amalei, no, we paskin like Rav. In other words, they forgot to say that say, okay. Mevarchin, v'choizrin umevarchin. Now, before you turn to Amar, just look at the last Rashirilio because he's explaining what's Mahakeshet. He says Chanan was upset that they didn't call him back. Now, what happened was, had they called him back, it would have been a zimun. That's the whole thing over here. Not calling him back, there was no zimun. So he says, Shekvar zimnu imoi. The reason why they didn't call him back, they had to repeat the benching because they forgot to say, or they forgot the Alav Yavim. They went with Rav, they went with the Braisa. If it was nervous, then zimun, they already fulfilled. It means even though you have to bench again, once you were yoytze zimun, that's the whole pshat. Of ayin vavam is beis. The Ashkechan, they forgot to matkara b'shapsa. Beautiful. So that will be the exception. That even though they are doing it again, you can't say that einom rishayim lechalik. They benched already. They have to repeat it, but they didn't have to call him back. No. I think without him there wasn't even a zimah. Didn't bother them. That's the whole word. Now let's go back. Loi Omar Kain. Rabbi Baba Shem Rab Chuna in the name of Rav Yirmiyah, that what? That Mata Baba Shem Rav, that Shachach V'Lehizker Shel Shabbos, didn't we have another sheet? That if you forgot to say then the solution is you can open up a Siddur Tilas Hashem. It's Gavaldik, Ashenasam Menuchal Am Yisrael. You look inside the Siddur Tilas Hashem and you'll see that after Uvenei, before HaToiv Umeitiv, if you remember, you already finished the Uvenei, you forgot to say, you say, Baruch Ato Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. Shenosan Shabbosos, that's the word, Lemenucha. La'ama Yisrael bi ahava lo'oisu lo'bris, Baruch Ato Hashem. Baruch Ato Hashem Ekadosh Shabbos. So 1 second, you go back to the benching, or you add that. So he says, Cain means kan. Cain means here. Depends. Cain, big machlokes b'nei Moshe and the Charedim. Big machlokes b'nei Moshe and the Charedim. Let's go with the Charedim. The Charedim holds. You know what the Bavli answers? Let me say by heart. The Bavli answers, and we pass like the Bavli. It depends when you remember. If you remember before Atoiv Umetiv, and you don't go back to the beginning, you add the bracha that we just mentioned. If you remember, after you finish even Atoivo Meitiv, then you go back to the beginning. So is the way it's learned in the Bavli. And the Pnei Moshe, not to make a machlekes Bavli in Yerushalmi, let's go with the Pnei Moshe, 4 lines on the top. Kan, the Omrin and Tzarech Lachzor Levarech Kishesiach Datoi. Siach Dati means you already began Hatoivo Meitiv. In other words, you are Masiach Das, you mentioned Shabbos, it's too late. Then you have to go back to the beginning. And when it says the Kivan Shanach, and that's why in that story they went back to the beginning. They finished benching. That is what the Bavli says explicitly, and that's the way the Pnei Moshe wants to learn in the Yerushalmi. However, since the Yerushalmi doesn't mention a word about Toivu Meitiv, the Charedim learns it's a machlekes Bavli Yerushalmi, which is, look inside the Charedim, also 4 lines from the top, Kan, you see, instead of the words Cain, it means the same thing. Chaf Nun is Cain, but it means here. Kan, Kishesiya Datoi, meaning, Achar Shesaimu Arba Brachas. If when you finish the 4 brachas, even then, you didn't remember. In other words, if you remember when you finished that Toivo Meitiv, but you're still sitting together, oichet, good. You don't have to go back. If your Masiach Das means that loy niskeru mayad, you didn't even remember after benching. You mamish, you finished benching and you left already. Ella, hisichu datam li'inyan acher. They already moved on. Now, shuv lemahani shiyim rebarach hachanasam nochalam Yisrael. L'charei de machlokes Bavli Yerushalmi. Let's read it inside. Kan shesiyadati. The kam shleisiyadati. Now let's go weiter. I know it's late, but let's have just a few more lines. It says, 10 people are walking on the road. Even though they're eating off from the same bread. Guys, this is connected to what we learned in the previous chapter. Since they were not reclining together. Remember that? The Baruch Latzmi means, guys, clear, both the Bracha Rishayna and the Birchas Hamazon, Yashvu, once they sat down and they ate, even if they're eating from that was the big cloud. Now the Gemara says, let's just finish this last word. Rabbi Yirmiyah, that Rabbi Yirmiyah would lead the Zimun when they ate on it in, says the Pnei Moshe. What are we talking about? He was working with his Chavedim, with his friends, the moment he came to a pundik, since now they're sitting down, like that, they're sitting down is what united them, and they can make the bracha before and afterwards all together. I know a bit late, but we're going to stop over here, and God willing to be continued.